Welcome to Leadership Unlearned and Reframed. In this podcast, we invite leaders, consultants, coaches, and almost anybody who has or is adjacent to leaders. In this program, we are inviting you to suspend all that you believe and know about leadership. We are inviting you to unlearn what you've learned. And because we're taking away from you, we are reframing your experience with new words, new ideas, new thoughts, new theories. Every Tuesday at 7 p.m. Eastern, which will be 8 p.m. Caribbean time, I am joined by a guest, hence the we. So today, to speak to me about leadership and her work with leaders is Karel McIntosh. Before I introduce you to Karel McIntosh, I want you to consider that leadership is not just for an organization. You have a family system. What would it look like if you were to take up leadership in your family system, in your community, in your place of worship, in your local netball or football team? All of these systems are places in which you can exercise your leadership. It really is needed to make a difference. So I'm going to hand over Carol. Welcome to our show.
Thanks for having me.
And Carol, can you introduce yourself and what you do to the audience?
Okay, Karel McIntosh. I am a communication professional through and through, and I'm also a coach and corporate trainer. So, a lot of what I've done along the way has always been about people. And now, as a coach, I work a lot with teams and groups because, with that kind of scale, you can help people to create change at scale. That also includes leadership coaching. So, the thing about being a coach is that sometimes there's just so many things you can say, well, I do this list of 20 things and it's a mouthful. But it really comes down for me to helping people to find their personal power, to be able to express themselves. Because a lot of the communication issues that we find in families and workplaces comes down to an individual believing that they can or cannot influence a situation or have their voice heard. So what I do just comes down to communication, personal power, and people learning to understand each other and learning how to get along despite having differences.
So in terms of how do you manage the tension between expressing personal power and fitting
Mhm.
into a group?
Yeah, yeah. The tension between that really comes down to identity and belief. It
Mm.
comes down to things like if someone has even been in environments where they're allowed to do that. Your family is your first system. And there are so many things that we learn, whether we recognize it or not, about how we show up. I mean, luckily or unluckily for me, I'm an only girl and I'm the
Oh.
third out of four. So I think I got accustomed to being in the middle and being among strong personalities. And so for corporate speak, we hear about psychological safety, and psychological safety is what helps to to lessen some of that tension so people can feel safe to say what they needed to say. Obviously, most people are not trying to be disrespectful, but sometimes the egos in the room might feel that, hey, you think you know something. I think therefore you are disrespectful by sharing a differing opinion. So it comes back to also that person feeling the courage we're going to talk about. Whether it's a value for them to speak up if they know that it's something that is meant to add to the conversation.
So this is what I find interesting. So I'm listening to your journey,
Mm,
communication specialist into coaching, working a lot with teams. And of course, teams always ask you to do training and development once it is they find value in what you're doing. It's just like a
yeah.
default position, right? Not that you're a trainer, it's just that your default to training and development. And then
Yeah.
there's this sense of that push and pull between my personal power and my need to fit into the team. And then there's the
Yes.
ego at play in terms of how we hear people's request to be heard and to be seen, even though we know that to be heard and to be seen is psychological safety. So it sounds like
Yeah.
there may be some tensions in leaders around
Yes.
expression of personal power, expression of
Hmm.
agency, and this sort of I want to hear and see my people. Can you speak
Yeah.
a little bit about that?
Yes, agency is such a big part of it, right? Just being able to believe that you can tell your boss something, or your colleague, or your direct report, or the courier who came to drop off something for the company, believing in that you can connect with another human being. I mean, you mentioned at the start that you're a leader in your personal life, in your church, in your football team, wherever it is. There are some people at work, they are meek and mild. And then you see them at gym and they are the one they're in charge of everyone because there they feel seen and heard. And a big part of agency too really is this person asking themselves, as you would say in Caribbean speak, I go take a chance. I go try a thing. What is the worst? Will they fire me? Will they not fire me? And so the more it's like children testing boundaries too. And you see with personalities, agency has a lot to do with personality as well. Some people are impulsive, some people are assertive, some people just do it and then they see where the chips fall. But a big part with that agency part of it too is what kind of day do you want to have? Like, that's what I just bring it down to. If you don't say something, how will you know that this can change the energy of your day? And going back to what is value, has the organization defined to an employee what makes them be seen as valuable? So the agency part of it is filled with so many ifs and ands and buts, but it comes down to trying.
Yeah, so let me see if I could track what you're saying. So the trying is on the part of the individual to sort of test the waters so that they
Yeah.
could see whether or not they will be allowed to have agency. And then
Yeah.
there's the other side in terms of the leader's responsibility to create the safety for people to make that effort.
Yes. And there are two parts to it, right?
Mhm.
Because we see this dynamic where the leader has to give you permission. The, the leader has to give you permission to be yourself. But who needs to give you permission to be yourself? So there's a part of it where you can say, oh, my boss is this, that, or the other. But also, what choice are you making about how you show up? So, yes,
Mm.
we want the leaders to create that welcoming environment. That just brings up a memory for me many years ago in a supervisory training program. Someone complained about their boss is so, um, not nice, blah, 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 blah. And I just asked, I wasn't even a coach then, right? Because I just always knew coach meant something more than just telling people what to do. But I was like, have you ever smiled at your boss? And they were like, no. I'm like, so if no one smiles at the boss, where does the expectation come from that the boss is going to smile at you? The boss doesn't feel like they fit in. And I think people forget that within the fitting in part of it, your leader also wants to be liked. Your leader feels bad when they feel that nobody likes them. They might pretend that they don't, but it gets to them on some kind of level.
Yeah, and I guess as you're speaking, what I'm really getting the sense of, I don't want to say in defense of leaders, I'm thinking more of explaining the experience of leadership.
Mm-hmm.
And the word lonely really comes up for me because there's so much expectation and
Yes.
there's so many fingers pointing saying you should.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Leaders feel like they need to be perfect.
Yeah.
They feel as if they can't admit, you know what, I don't know what's going on. And I mean, there are leaders who do that. You do hear of a CEO who walks into a meeting and says, hey, y'all, what ideas do you have? And they're like, well, boss, we're looking at you. And he's like, I don't know what you're doing. So that's why I came to y'all. But I think, in organizational life, we've been put into these boxes where we believe that one, you need to be professional. Being professional means being well behaved, well spoken, not making risque jokes, all of these different things, right? And it strips people of their personality. It strips people of the things that makes it really nice to be around them. There are some people, if they met outside of the workplace, they'd be the best of friends, right? But inside with the stress and all of that, things get askew. But really looking at who has imposed this identity on you? Who has imposed these expectations on you? People join organizations, and on both parts, we assume things as opposed to just stopping on a basic human level. And it's like, what part of this is heavy for you? Or boss, what part of this do you need? Or I don't understand what you're saying. Can you explain it to me a different kind of way? And so it's really looking at what are we accepting as just these roles that we're supposed to play. And if we stop and ask a question and improvise, like you hear
So
about
it's an
Denzel Washington, and they improvise, they ad lib their lines, they make up things, they make up things, and we can ad lib too.
so that's it's a number of things you put on the table, right? So the first one is the sense of, I mean, the question is, who told anybody that when they walk through the office, they need to become another person?
Yeah.
And I think that's I don't think any, I mean, I've worked in many organizations and work with a number of clients. And I don't think anybody ever said you need to be. Now, in
Mm-hmm.
the employee handbook, you usually see something about being professional, which is
Yeah.
never defined. And it just seems like the word professional is like the tightest, smallest version of ourselves. I think that's how we interpret it, that we should be the smallest version of ourselves to fit into these roles or to fit into a
Yeah.
job description. So to me, that's a myth that needs to be busted, right? Because
Yes.
at some point in time, that doesn't serve us and it doesn't serve the organization, right? So that's one point there. The second point is, I love the point you made about if I met you outside of work, I might even like you, right? Because who's gonna like the smallest, tiniest part of Karel? It'll probably
Yeah.
be the most boring part of you, right?
Yeah.
So thankfully, I didn't meet you as a professional in a job. Yeah. And I guess the question would be in terms of your work as a team
Yeah.
coach, how do you get people to be bigger than the smallest, tiniest piece of themselves that they think
Yeah.
is their professional persona?
Yeah. I mean, one of the frameworks, one of the techniques I use is sort of like going to change your glasses. When you do that eye test and they put the lens in and they go, "Are you seeing? Are you seeing what's sharp? What's blurry?" And really, everyone is looking at the same thing. But some
Hmm.
people have a sharp lens, some people have it blurry, different levels. And if we get it aligned, you start to realize we're all seeing this, but from different vantage points. So one of the things I look at is, what is your thinking style? What is your feeling style? There's a personality framework that I love called True Tilt, and it looks at the whole person. And what that really just means is that there, as you said, the smallest part of you might be operating with. What are the other parts of you that you're not tapping into? So, what is the courageous part of you that you're not tapping into? The optimistic part of you, the analytical part of you, all of these, the empathetic part of you. It looks different for all of us. And people start to understand that, you know what? Mary, let's name the person Mary. Mary is difficult. Mary is this, that, and the other. But when you stop and pay attention to how Mary sees the world, you realize that Mary is not trying to be difficult. Mary is not trying to trigger you or upset you. This is the coping mechanism that Mary has built to walk through the world with. And you have your own coping mechanism. And if you stop and say, wait a minute, both of us are trying to make curry, but one person is calling it chicken curry and one person is calling it curry.
That's a whole other discussion. Don't go there, Carol. Do not. You
You
can resist.
know? I couldn't resist it. I couldn't resist it.
I
But
know.
really, we never stopped to say, wait a minute, you are different. Sesame Street song, nobody is like I am. I have my own body, you have your own body, that kind of thing. And we all say we're unique, but we don't stop in a moment to say, wait a minute, your uniqueness and my uniqueness are butting heads. Not because they want to, but because they haven't stopped to acknowledge that Maxine is different to Carol and vice versa, but they want the same things. Now that they know what these differences are, how does that help them to sharpen the image and chart a way forward?
Yeah. And I think that is I think what you're describing there, I always say to people, there's no I in team, but there's an M and a me and an E,
Yeah.
right? So the me is very important. And
Very.
so what I'm hearing you say is that the individual and how the individual sees the world is the key to understanding the individual. It's also the key to understanding why me and Mary may be butting heads, not because of chicken curry or curry chicken, but because but because we're both seeing the same thing and probably calling it a different name or have a different reaction, both of which are valid. And so,
Hmm.
what I like about what you're saying in terms of looking at this test and realizing there's so many ways in which we can be, how do we get Mary to understand what I'm
Yeah.
seeing? How do I get me to understand what she is seeing so that we could paint a bigger picture and have
Hmm.
more options?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, just even out of that, right? I mean, even if I'm not using an assessment, it's like, let's just stop for a minute here. What is the thing that you want, and what is the thing that the other person wants? Because as much as working with teams, it's about the team, this entity. I like to talk about the Avengers, they become one. But before you become one, you are different parts, right?
Yeah.
And so them understanding that, even them recognizing for themselves, Mary might recognize, oh, I didn't realize that I do this as a way to protect myself. And I never
Mhm.
realized how it impacts the team, or sometimes even, I have something to do and I might be like, yeah, playing the fool because I really should be on top of this a bit more. So I come to that sense of accountability for myself because I'm now given that space. So with the teams too and with the individuals, it's really stopping to say, what's going on here? And not what's going on in here in like you're getting buff.
Mhm,
Like
mhm,
mommy and daddy,
mhm.
what madness are you all doing in the room here today? But it's like, I draw a circle. There's you, Mary, and whoever else, but there's also a system, right? There's also the organizational pressures. There are the KPIs. There are the higher targets that have been put on y'all, despite the economy being what it is, despite all the other things that are impacting the business. And you are supposed to be literally an Avenger, a superhero who achieves the impossible, despite all of these things. And it's like, what is the stress that's impacting you? And how is that stopping you from even saying how you're feeling and stopping to consider how the other person is feeling? About the leader who got 2 hours of sleep last night and they are running on fumes. And it's not that they don't want to be understanding, they're just so tired that they forgot to be understanding.
Yeah. I think the sense I'm getting is that it seems like to do this, you really need to be mature. Um, and that is both in terms of the leader as well as the employees,
Yeah.
because there's a certain level of maturity that goes with being able to understand somebody else's beat
Mm-hmm.
into the drum, the sound of a
Yeah.
different drum, and to accept that it's okay. And in especially small societies like us, there are big rule books, right? And there are a lot of unspoken rules about what people should do and what you must
Yeah.
do and what you have to do. So there's almost this unspoken limitation. And I mean, I guess I answered my question before about who told you to be what professional means, right? But how do you get people then to really step out of that framework and
Yeah.
begin to say, okay, well, I will show a bigger piece of myself.
Yeah. I'm very big on people having agency in training and coaching, which are two different modalities, but it really is bringing you into this space. Hey, your leader said that, they have these goals they want to achieve. What do you want? What do you want to get out of this? They've said their part. What's your part? What do you want to get out of this? How can we create this together? And that's what I love about coaching. It's not something that's imposed on the other person. It really is, we call it co-creation, but it really is saying, hey, come add your piece to this thing. What you want? Any chicken curry? Like, what is the special thing that what is the special thing that you like to add or you want to see or that you're feeling? And they start to add pieces. Another piece is, oh, I need coaching because something is wrong with me. I had a team who realized This is not about something we have problems or something is wrong with us. This is really about potential because they were a team who were from all appearances worked well together. And when we did so, I do groundwork to establish one, what do you want this to be? What do you want this to feel like? And what is your assessment of your team? So I create like mapping assessments and stuff where they are the ones who score themselves, not even like a fancy assessment, but like, simple questions. And then you put a score. And then when they look at all of the numbers, they realize, yeah, we are the ones who said trust is low or accountability is low. Or maybe the leader thinks everything is fine on this category, but we have a different experience. What is this showing up for us? So they really start to look at this elephant in the room and they're gonna dance around it for a bit. I do things like I bring stuffed elephants, which people love, and they get to name their stuffed toy, but it becomes this thing where the elephant is scary because we think it's scary, as opposed to it's just this thing that we haven't tried talking about. So really including them in the process for them to create the experience. Because coaching for me has to feel, joy and courage are very important to me. They are a big part of who I am. I'm lucky enough to, I feel as if I got thrown some extra drops of joy when I was born. And it brings back people having dignity in the workplace, enjoying getting up in the morning and going to work. One of my favorite places to work was the Tourism Development Corporation. We used to go to work on a weekend. Like, there's no reason for you to go to work. There's nothing urgent at that particular time, but you just love being there. And other people are there too because we had dignity. We were able to express ourselves, to be bold, that kind of thing. And it was because of the leadership. But coming back to all of that, it really comes down to, do people have agency in the process? Are leaders willing to give their teams that agency? So the other question is, leader, you said you want this thing. I had a leader who said, Carol, I want coaching for this person. I want them to be more confident. And I asked him, and you said you want this person to be confident and bold and all of these things. What tells you that you're ready for that version of the person? And he was like, well, yeah, I didn't think about that part because what happens now with that. But really the agency to wrap it up, the agency is very important, and just including people. What do you want? Because you are the one who's coming to work every day. Not me. I get to just show up every once in a while, but what do you want?
So this word agency is clearly very important to you because at the top when we started, you mentioned agency, and it keeps popping up in different forms. So without using the word, you may have you spoke about the fact that you want people to be part of this process. You want people to assess the problem. You want
Yeah.
people to name the elephants in the room, whether it's literal stuff or otherwise. You want people to really express how this impacts them. And looking at the flip side in terms of leader bringing you in, you want the leader to be fully aware of what you have to deal with when people start to step out of their small boxes and begin to express themselves. Are you ready for it? And
Mm-hmm.
so, from where you sit and what you've seen, are leaders really ready for people to step out of their boxes?
Yeah. um, I would use my that law thing. It depends. I remember that from corporate law in UE when the lecturer said, "Don't hit me with the it depends." But they are leaders. I would say yes, they are leaders. I have been fortunate enough to work with leaders who they know it's uncomfortable. They feel the discomfort because it also means that the person starts to get bolder to tell you things that they didn't tell you before, or to show up some of your shadows or some of the things you do or the decisions you make that impact the team that you don't realize just how much it impacts them. But there are some, they're aware of it. There are some who they go gunning down the road trying to do their own transformation alongside the team, because I always have separate leadership coaching with the leader to support, to ensure that you're not derailing yourself, you're not derailing the team. Then there are some leaders who are very results oriented and they get caught up in but the KPI or but we needed to hit this target. And they themselves are caught in their own puppet loop. It's not that they don't want the change, but they haven't yet broken out of let me stop for 2 minutes and consider, if I didn't force myself to push through and kill out myself, as we would say, what would my other response be? So one of the things I've learned to do over the years is to be, I'll take a bit more time in discovery to assess whether this leader is truly ready. Because sometimes they say they're ready, and when you get into the nitty gritty of it, they're like, oh, this is touchy feely. And it's like, I told somebody last week, I said, but the touchy feely is you're touching and feeling yourself. It's not, this kumbaya thing. It's just stopping to ask yourself, what goes through my mind when the day comes? So I would say there are some who they genuinely want to do it and they're willing to go through the irritations, the discomfort, the tension. There are some who they want to do it, but they want to do it without getting a cut, and not having to do any work themselves. And then there are those who just don't care, if we're being honest. And so I've learned over the period, the time I've been doing this, to really look for that alignment and spend some more time there
Yeah.
before going gung-ho into a corporate engagement. And then they're like, oh, in 6 months, everybody has to be like the most amazing version of themselves. I tell people, listen to me. We're doing this for 6 months or 9 months or whatever. But the reality is your pace is your pace. The question is, what is the foundation that you're laying to be responsible for your continuous growth after this is over? So I push back on clients because people, I do this for real change, for real impact, for the human. A check is nice. A check is always nice. But I want to feel as if I am making a difference.
Yeah. And so this is so, I think this is an interesting point in terms of are you ready for change?
Yeah.
Because everybody wants an empowered and an expressive and a communicative and a creative and a connected and an excited worker, right? They want a team member who's all of that. And
Yeah.
that comes with voice. That
Mm-hmm.
comes with expressing my opinions. That comes with taking a risk. That comes with, say, with giving you feedback in the moment. And if you have been dealing with that quiet, professional me, as defined by the handbook, it's going to be a huge change for you to manage,
Mm-hmm.
right? I mean, I love when I have a team member who's like, I had a team member who's like every Monday morning she has a new idea. So I used to say, great, go put it on paper, then I'll look at it because I mean, I could not keep up. And
Yeah.
it was a joke between us because it was like, I can't keep up with you. You just bring them, come in, and I will, when you flesh out the idea, I will say what we could do, what we can't do, and we'll discuss it some more. But that was me. But I could understand how she would be annoying to, in fact, she was annoying to other managers who she worked with after me. She would call
Yeah.
me and we have discussions about how to temper it down, right? Because not everybody is going to say, yeah, bring your ideas. So it is something that I think I'm happy that you're coaching the leaders because this change that they want, they themselves have to learn to manage that change because it
Mm-hmm.
could be radically different moving from the professional to an empowered employee who has agency. It's a
Yeah.
completely different kettle of fish.
Yeah. Creating
Yeah.
that space. I told a team of managers the other day, I met with several staff, and I'm like, I see a bunch of leaders, people who are bold, who say what they need to say, but they're in a system that imposes things on them. So the resistance feels stronger because they're willing to push back.
Yeah.
But ask yourself, what's the reasoning below the surface, and creating that space for it is so important. And I relate to these things because I experienced these things too when I worked. I always remember having a boss who told me I was hired because they thought I was smart and quick thinking and all of these things. And then when I got into the role, it was, I didn't hire you to think, I hired you to do what I
Mm.
told you to do, or pushing back on things. And you're in marketing, you're so excited, you have all of these ideas. And then I learned, without reading a book or Google, but I said, okay, oh, they don't like the confident voice, right? So I'll ask this in a question format. You do that kind of wrong the way, like when you hear women say, "Oh, I make my husband feel he had the idea." I invariably learned to do those things or sometimes push back. And I give a lot of credit to my dad for encouraging courage and confidence in me, letting me leave jobs when I didn't want to be there anymore. But he was teaching me agency. He was teaching me that they can't tell you what to do with your day. He wasn't encouraging, well, just leave. But it was more like, do you feel that, what are your boundaries? What are your non-negotiables? And I think that's something to always tell people. First, before entering a conversation, ask yourself what you're willing to lose, what you
Mhm.
can't lose, how you can negotiate, what does the other person need? Because that leader wants to go home at 4 o'clock too, ideally if they could. They want to go and hang out with their family. They want to just go and sleep because they're tired, but we don't acknowledge the basic things. And I have a team who makes a joke when we say, "How you going?" And they'll say, "Good." And I'll be like, "What is good?" So now their joke is whenever somebody says, "I good," they'll go, "What does good mean?" Because when I ask, "What does good mean?" you hear about who's ready to collapse, whose face is numb, and everybody's in shock. Like people are going through health issues and just pretending that everything is okay. And just bringing dignity back to the workplace, and just empathy is just, you feel tired too. Empathy is not a touchy-feely Mother Teresa kind of thing. It's literally just, okay, you're tired and you have this thing to hand up. What do you need? What do you think will give you that extra energy to do it? For somebody, it's going in a corner and sleeping for 10 minutes or getting a bite of food. Simple things. So it really comes down to giving people permission to find what fuels their work and their ability to deliver the best of themselves.
Yeah, so that word agency is so important to you. And it sounds like you learned it from your dad,
I
and he
did.
was able to support you to develop your own sense of self and to really create space for your voice and choice, right? It's not working for
Yes.
me, I can leave. So I
Yeah.
just want to note that we do have a guest with us tonight, and just to open the floor, Kamala, before we close off, if there's anything you want to say or ask, feel free to do so at this moment.
Thank you. I actually joined because I just saw the updates on Karel's feed. But I wanted what one of the things that resonated with me, and I don't think it's something that people speak about very often, is that the leadership journey is very, very lonely. And often the persons in those roles are not humanized enough.
Mm-hmm.
And but there's not many places for that to be expressed in a healthy manner. So you're left with your devices. They like to have this notion of we throw you in the water, so you need to learn to swim, but sometimes you're not learning to swim. You're learning to just,
Drop.
drink enough salt water not to sink. So I found that was a very, very important point, and I would challenge both of you to bring out some more of that discourse in the public domain, because when you hear about management,
Mm-hmm.
the notion of a bad manager, there's a flip side to it. It's a person who is struggling to figure
Yeah.
out, moving from that individual contributor role into a leadership role it could be traumatizing.
It's done.
And it could be stunting as well as a professional. And there's not enough discourse around that experience of,
Yeah.
of it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Carol, you want to respond to that? And then I will add my 2 cents, and then we'd wrap this up.
Yeah. Very, very real, insightful sharing there, Camilla, because the reality is people are just in survival mode and they're not always getting the support. The expectation is you get promoted and you're supposed to be able to figure it out in a space where there's no one to really bounce the feeling, the being part of being a leader. Leader is not a skill. Leadership is being and
Mhm.
going around all that stress. And so for leaders in that position to, it might be asking yourself on a morning, like what is the thing you do to set your intention for the day, to be very much in control of, being aware, not in control, being aware of where you're at, how are you feeling, and what can you handle that day. Because we've been programmed, I was talking to a friend today, to believe we could do 10 million things in one day, And we can't. And then we end up just crossing off 3 things off of the to do list and feeling defeated, feeling overwhelmed. And so, what can you do to create that space around and throughout your whole life? What are the, if you don't have those resources in work, what are the resources that you have outside of work that sustain you and strengthen you so that you can build yourself and move from survival to adapting, and being able to thrive on your own terms? And, Maxine, you mentioned choice. What are the choices? What are the things you're willing to get or not get in that experience?
Yeah. And yeah, I think what I want to add there is that most of us were made managers or leaders because we excelled at a technical skill. So you're in the accounts department, you're really good at doing accounting, you transfer
Yeah.
into the leadership role, leading the team of accountants or junior accountants. And I think that is where organizations don't pay enough attention to when they transition a technical person
Yeah.
into a team management role, regardless of the title that you're holding, right? And regardless of where it is in the organizations you're managing this team.
Mm-hmm.
So there is a certain amount of not net of skills, because there's some things that you have to leave behind and some things you need to hold on to. So,
Yeah.
you were great at accounts reconciliation. If you're an engineer, you're great at maintaining certain equipment. And as a manager of a team, you're not required to do that anymore. So I think
Mm-hmm.
part of the stress comes from holding on to the old because you're not exactly sure what to embrace in the new. So
Yeah.
there's a sort of tension that you're holding, which really doesn't serve you anymore. And it
Yeah.
is lonely because you have been promoted, and who are you going to tell that, hey, I don't know what to do because it kind of looks like maybe we should not have promoted you. So there's a lot of it would be great if more organizations, would find support external to the organization, whether it's through mentoring or
Mm-hmm.
coaching, for their newly promoted. And that's a whole other conversation. But I do want to recognize, Kamala, that it is lonely and
Yeah.
there is a growing understanding by people within your organization and outside of it that it is lonely. Leadership is a very lonely job.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
normalizing that conversation, right?
Yeah.
Normalizing it.
Yeah.
I told somebody once, why didn't you warn me when I got a manager job? It's like, why didn't you warn me it was like this? And
Yeah.
she's like, oh, you could buy a house now. It's so good. And I'm like, it is stressful as hell, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, so thanks for bringing that up, and I'm sure I think I'll look for a guest who can probably speak about that a little bit more.
Yeah.
And I will definitely Karel, I know we'll probably have another conversation because there's so much more to get into. So I just want to summarize the things that you've shared with us today in terms of this idea of, and I just get an idea of a team of little Lego people, all very small, you know, and they're coming together to do this really important piece of work, each of them hiding their superpower, because you did mention the Avengers, all of them hiding their superpower and playing it safe. And
Yeah.
it's a sort of dance, right? Because they're playing it safe and their leader wants them to unleash their superpower. And the question for the leader is, are you willing to deal with the superpower when it's unleashed? Can you deal with
Mm-hmm.
it? So
Mm-hmm.
this sense of releasing the team energy also means we need to support the leader as they transition from those quiet little Lego pieces to the superheroes that they are, where they've unleashed their power and they've claimed their agency.
Yeah.
So a lot of work all the way around and a lot of, a lot of experimentation, a lot of risk taking, a lot of failure, a lot
Mm-hmm.
of, but when it all works, it seems that it will just be like very magical for both
Yeah.
the leader and the team.
Yeah.
So I want to thank you for showing up with us today. Yeah, time flies very fast when you're having
Very.
fun. And we could always re-engage and have this conversation. And the reason I'm saying that is because you just mentioned lightly your joy and courage. And I know that you wanted to share more about that because you are a joyous person. and you have been trained to take your agency with courage. So I'm going to invite you back in a few weeks so we can have that conversation. Since we got the first layer off, we could really get further into
It's a
to
rabbit hole,
doing the
right?
courage. Was that?
I said it's a rabbit hole. You know,
We love
the
rabbit
amount of
holes. That's the
things.
work we do. Yeah. We're not afraid of rabbit holes. Yeah.
Aw.
Yeah. Okay, so Carol, I want to thank you very much for showing up with us this evening, and we will reconvene. So, if you're listening to us, whether it's on Facebook Live or you've actually joined our Zoom call like Camilla, we are here every Tuesday at 7 p.m. Eastern. If you're in Trinidad and Tobago, that will be 8 p.m. Same channel, same time, every time. So, see you next week. I may have a guest or I may just be on answering questions. So feel free to join me. It's going to be Carnival Tuesday. So I know a lot of people will not be joining me. So thanks a lot, Carol, for coming on tonight and sharing your wisdom and your experience about coaching teams. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much for having me.
And if someone wants to get in touch with you, what's the best way for them to get in touch with you?
They can find me on LinkedIn, Instagram, or they can send an email to Karel at livewiredgroup.com, and it's Karel, Karel. Just think Karen with an L.
Yes, Karen with an L. Thank you very much, Carol. Enjoy the rest of your day.
All right,
Bye. Bye,
bye.
Camilla.
Bye bye.